Captain James Mitchell settled into seat 22C, helping his 9-year-old daughter Sophia buckle her seatbelt for their flight to Washington, D.C. At 34, James had the quiet bearing of someone who had served his country with distinction, though today he wore simple civilian clothes and carried himself like any other single father traveling with his child. Sophia pressed her face to the window, excitement radiating from her small frame.
"Daddy, do you think we'll really get to see the White House?"
James smiled, smoothing down his daughter's curly brown hair. "We'll definitely try, sweetheart. This whole trip is about celebrating your science fair victory, remember?" The flight attendant, a woman in her 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and an air of self-importance, approached their row with barely concealed irritation. Her nameplate read Patricia Wells, and everything about her demeanor suggested someone who believed first-class passengers deserved her attention more than those in coach. "Sir," Patricia said in a tone that immediately put James on edge, "I need to see your boarding passes again. There seems to be some confusion about your seats." James produced the boarding passes, his voice remaining calm and respectful. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" Patricia examined the passes with theatrical scrutiny, clearly looking for an excuse to create trouble. "These appear to be legitimate, but I find it odd that someone like you would be traveling to Washington on such short notice." "Someone like me?" James asked quietly, though Sophia could sense the shift in her father's tone. "Well," Patricia said, lowering her voice but not enough to prevent other passengers from hearing, "single fathers traveling alone with children to the capital. It raises security concerns, especially when the passengers don't appear to have the means for such travel." James felt heat rise in his neck but kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, we're traveling because my daughter won a national science competition. Her prize includes this trip to D.C. Patricia's skeptical expression made it clear she didn't believe him. "Sir, I'm going to need to see additional identification and proof of your purpose for travel." Other passengers began to take notice of the confrontation, some watching with curiosity, others with growing discomfort at Patricia's obvious discrimination. "Daddy," Sophia whispered, tugging on James's sleeve, "why is the lady being mean to us?" Before James could respond, Patricia continued her interrogation. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings. I think there's been a mistake with your reservations." James looked at his daughter's confused and hurt expression, then at the flight attendant who was clearly enjoying her power to humiliate them in front of other passengers. "Ma'am," James said, his voice carrying a new edge of authority, "I need you to contact your supervisor immediately." "I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft," Patricia replied smugly, "and I'm telling you that you and your daughter need to deplane." "No," James said simply, his military training evident in the single word. Patricia's eyes flashed with anger. "Sir, if you don't comply, I'll have security remove you from this aircraft." James reached into his wallet and handed Patricia his identification. "Before you make that call, I think you should take a closer look at who you're talking to." Patricia glanced at the ID dismissively, then did a double take. Her face went pale as she read the name and credentials more carefully. "Sir, this says, Captain James Phoenix Mitchell, United States Air Force," James said quietly but clearly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "And before you ask, my call sign is Phoenix because I've been shot down twice and walked away both times." The color drained completely from Patricia's face. "Captain Mitchell, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what?" James asked, his voice still calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "That someone in civilian clothes might deserve basic respect? That a single father traveling with his daughter might have a legitimate reason for being here?" Sophia looked up at her father with new interest. She knew he was in the Air Force, but she'd never seen him in full command mode before. "Sir," Patricia stammered, "I apologize for any misunderstanding. Please let me get you upgraded to first class." "The misunderstanding," James said firmly, "is that you assumed my worth based on my appearance and my circumstances. The seats we have are fine. What's not fine is treating passengers with disrespect because you've made assumptions about who they are or why they're traveling." A man in his 50s sitting across the aisle leaned forward. "Excuse me, did you say Phoenix?" "Captain Phoenix Mitchell." James looked at the man with mild curiosity. "Yes, sir." "Colonel Richard Hayes, retired Air Force intelligence," the man said, extending his hand. Sir, I was briefed on your missions in Afghanistan. The extraction you led in Helmand province. That was you? James shook the man's hand but tried to deflect the attention. Just doing my job, Colonel. But Colonel Hayes wasn't finished. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the cabin, you're in the presence of one of the most decorated fighter pilots in the Air Force. Captain Mitchell has flown over 200 combat missions and saved countless lives. Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Other passengers began to applaud, and several service members on the flight stood to shake James's hand. Daddy, Sophia whispered in amazement. You're famous? Not famous, sweetheart, James replied softly. Just someone who serves his country. As the commotion settled down, Patricia approached their seats once more, this time with genuine humility. Captain Mitchell, I owe you and your daughter a sincere apology. My behavior was unprofessional and unacceptable. James looked at Patricia for a long moment, then at Sophia, who was watching the exchange with keen interest in how her father would handle the situation. Apology accepted, James said simply. But I hope you'll remember that every passenger deserves to be treated with dignity, not just those with military credentials or impressive job titles. What happened next surprised everyone on the flight. About 30 minutes after takeoff, the captain's voice came over the intercom with an unusual announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've just received word from air traffic control that we're being honored with a military escort. It seems we have a very special passenger on board today. Through the aircraft windows, passengers could see two F-16 fighter jets taking position alongside their commercial airliner. The captain continued, Captain James Mitchell, if you're listening, this is Colonel Patterson from the 1st Fighter Wing. We're escorting you and your daughter to D.C. on direct orders from the Pentagon. It's an honor to fly with you, Phoenix. Sophia's eyes were wide with amazement. Daddy, are those planes here for us? James felt tears gathering in his eyes as he realized the significance of the gesture. Someone at the Pentagon had learned about his travel and arranged this honor. The radio crackled again with a different voice. Phoenix, this is Razor leading the escort. We heard about your daughter's science fair victory. The whole wing is proud of both of you. As their commercial flight continued toward Washington with its fighter escort, James reflected on how quickly the situation had changed. Patricia's assumptions about his worth had been shattered not by his credentials, but by the recognition that every person deserves respect regardless of their apparent circumstances. Daddy, Sophia said, watching the fighter jets through her window. Is this really all for us? James hugged his daughter close. Sweetheart, this is happening because a lot of people believe that service to others matters and they want to honor that service. But more importantly, I hope you've learned something today about treating all people with kindness no matter who you think they are. Patricia approached one final time as they prepared for landing. Captain Mitchell, I want you to know that today taught me something important about making assumptions. Your daughter is lucky to have a father who leads by example. James nodded graciously. Patricia, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. As Air Force One diverted slightly to allow the fighter escorts to peel away in a ceremonial flyby, James understood that true honor doesn't come from recognition or special treatment. It comes from serving others with integrity, treating everyone with respect, and teaching the next generation that a person's worth isn't determined by their appearance, their job, or their circumstances, but by their character and their willingness to contribute to something larger than themselves.